My name is Natalie Claire Emerson. I'm 38, and I thought I was planning an anniversary dinner. Instead, I was setting a table for someone who'd already left the marriage, just not officially. I'd spent the afternoon ordering his favorite wine, picking out fresh lilies, and reserving a window seat at the restaurant where we first said I love you. He canceled an hour before said a client needed him. I believed him. At least, I pretended to. Have you ever looked at someone you love and thought, "You're already gone, aren't you?" Drop a comment if you've ever ignored your gut, because the truth felt too expensive. What happened next unraveled everything I thought I knew about my husband and myself. But let me take you back to that night, when all I wanted was connection. And all I got was silence. The lilies were already in the vase when he canceled. White Casablanca, his favorite, though I don't remember him ever saying it out loud. I'd just noticed he paused when he saw them at the farmer's market last spring. I'd picked up dinner reservations at Eddings, the only place in Charleston where the wine list reads like poetry and the chef remembers how you like your halibut. A corner booth, low lighting, river view. I'd even sent the maitre d' a message, 10th anniversary. Quiet celebration. No fuss. I stared at the text from Darren. Can't make it. Client emergency. Rain check? No punctuation. No apology. I stood in the kitchen, still holding the wine opener. I didn't reply right away. I just poured a glass, one for me, one for him, and set them on the table like I always did. Then I sat. And I waited. Not for him, really. For the voice inside me to stop screaming. He'd been distracted lately. Longer hours. More calls he couldn't take at home. Aller Selther. He blamed a new client going through a messy divorce. The irony of it would hit later. At the time, I told myself what I've told myself too many times in 10 years. He's just tired, you're just sensitive. But, that night, something different settled in my chest. Not fear, not anger. Absence. I lit a candle. Turned on the soft jazz he pretends to hate but hums to when he thinks I'm not listening. I sat in silence, sipping a wine he used to love. He didn't text again, didn't call. By 9 o'clock, the wine had gone warm and the lilies had started to droop. And I, a woman who owns her own hotel, manages 3 dozen staff, and makes million-dollar decisions without blinking, sat at my own dining room table like someone waiting to be picked. I felt ridiculous. So I got up. I cleared his glass, poured it down the sink, washed it, dried it, and stacked it in the cabinet like it hadn't happened. Then I walked upstairs and changed out of the dress I bought for him. I was slipping into an old tee when my phone buzzed again. Not Darren. Ray Pickett. Ray had worked maintenance at the Mariner House since before I bought it. He retired last year but still popped by for coffee or to tighten a squeaky hinge, which was code for checking in on me. He was like the hotel's grandfather. The message was simple. You all right? Saw Darren poking around the west corridor again today. Thought y'all were out tonight? My chest tightened. The west corridor? That's where we keep the executive suites. Not even staff wander there unless they have reason. Darren had no reason. Not unless he was showing someone something, or someone. I tapped back. I thought he was at work. Ray replied immediately. Not unless work involves wearing cologne and laughing with someone in stilettos. I blinked. Then closed my eyes. I didn't need details. Ray wouldn't have sent that if it weren't serious. He knew the difference between flirting and betrayal. A long breath shook loose from my chest. Not a sob. Not yet, just breath. I stared at my reflection in the kitchen window, the outline of a woman who looked tired, beautiful, foolish. I picked up my phone and called the Mariner House. When the front desk answered, I asked for Suite 4C. When they asked who was calling, I gave them my maiden name, Natalie Foster. The one I used on the ownership docs Darren never cared enough to read. Is it ready? I asked. It's always ready for you, Miss Foster. I didn't pack much. Just enough. One bag. My laptop. The binder Ray once joked I treated better than my wedding album. By the time I stepped into the back entrance of my own hotel, the one Darren's never bothered to ask about, it was nearly midnight. I signed myself in under Foster, nodded to the night staff, and took the private elevator up to the penthouse. The suite smelled like cedar and lavender. The lights were already set to low. I dropped the bag at the foot of the bed, took off my shoes, and walked barefoot across the rug I had imported from Asheville. I opened the minibar and pulled out a tiny bottle of champagne, the good kind. I didn't toast. I didn't cry. I just took a sip. Then I walked to the window, looked out over Charleston's quiet rooftops, and let the silence fill the space he used to take up in me. He didn't know where I was. He wouldn't ask. And I didn't plan on telling him. Not yet. The champagne bottle was still cold when I woke up the next morning. I hadn't meant to sleep. I was just going to lie down for a minute, clear my head, let the quiet of the suite wrap around me. But I must have drifted off, because sunlight was warming the edge of the bed and my phone was buzzing against the nightstand. 2 missed calls. Both from Darren. No voicemails. I didn't call back. I didn't feel like performing. Instead, I walked barefoot to the suite's kitchenette and made coffee dark roast, the way I liked it before I started compromising. While it brewed, I opened the curtains and let in the Charleston light. From 4 stories up, the city looked soft and old and unaware. The world kept moving, even when everything underneath it shifted. I sipped slowly and pulled out my laptop. Not to work. Just muscle memory. I clicked open my personal banking app, mostly out of habit. That's when I saw it. $15,000 transfer. From our joint account to a new trust I didn't recognize. It was labeled Everlane Holdings. Clean, professional, meaningless. My stomach dropped not because of the money, but because of the name. Darren was too smooth to name anything after us. Too practiced to leave fingerprints. But I'd seen that exact name on a file folder once, peeking out of his briefcase on a Sunday morning. He'd said it was a client's, flipped it closed before I could ask. He always closed things fast. I stared at the screen. The account was under his name only. That part wasn't unusual. We kept things loosely separate for tax purposes, or so I thought. My thumb hovered over the transaction details. I didn't open them. Not yet. Instead, I closed the laptop, walked to the mirror, and studied my face. My hair was still pinned from the night before, makeup faded but intact. I looked neutral. Like a woman in between reactions. Not quite betrayed. Not quite angry. Just standing still, in the space where belief had gone stale. I changed into jeans, tied my hair into a loose bun, and headed downstairs. I didn't take the main elevator. I used the service one. I wanted to walk through the back hallway of the hotel, to see things with different eyes. The Mariner House was a secret Darren never asked about. He knew I consulted in hospitality. Knew I had investments. But the paperwork for the hotel had been filed before we were married under my maiden name, through a shell company my CPA helped me build when I was still wearing name tags and managing weddings for other people. He never asked because he never assumed I'd be the one holding the cards. I made my way to the west corridor. Clean, freshly polished. The air smelled faintly of lemons and linen. Ray was sitting in the utility room just off the hall, sipping from a styrofoam cup and reading the paper like it was Sunday. "You always show up when I need to see you," I said. He looked up without surprise, as if he'd been expecting me. "Someone has to watch your blind spots," he said, folding the paper. "And your husband's been walking these halls like he owns the place." I didn't react. I just leaned against the doorframe. "Who was she?" He paused for a long beat. "Blonde, young. Long legs, short hemline. Real interested in the Garden View suites." "Did she look like someone who knows she's a secret?" I asked quietly. Ray tilted his head. "Number. She looked like someone who thinks she's about to become a wife." The words hit harder than I expected. Like someone pressed a bruise I didn't know was still fresh. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" He sipped his coffee. "Didn't seem like you were ready to know." I wasn't. Not until last night. "I think he's moving money," I said. "Offshore, or into trusts." Ray raised an eyebrow. "That man's a divorce lawyer. That's his native language." I nodded. The pieces were rearranging themselves in my head. The late nights, the guarded laptop, the sudden interest in separate taxes. He wasn't just cheating. He was strategizing. Ray stood up and pulled a small envelope from the inside of his jacket. "You should see this," he said, handing it over. "Found it on the security feed last Thursday. Didn't feel right throwing it out." Inside was a single screenshot. Grainy but clear enough. Darren, standing just outside Suite 20. Keycard in hand. Looking straight into the peephole camera like he owned the building. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because he looked so calm. So casual. Like a man checking on his investments. I handed it back. "Thanks. You don't want to keep it?" "Number. I already downloaded the security logs. I'm keeping everything." He nodded. "Don't confront him yet," Ray said. "Men like him, they count on reaction. You stay quiet, you stay dangerous." I left through the back entrance and walked into the Charleston air. The kind that smells like sea salt and old secrets. My phone buzzed again. Darren, one more missed call. This time, I didn't just ignore it. I blocked the number. Then I opened a new contact and typed in Joe Delgado's name. She was the only one who knew how to clean up a mess before it exploded. I hit call. Joe arrived the next morning, right on time, wheeling a sleek black carry-on and carrying 2 coffees. "You look like hell," she said, handing me the stronger one. "I didn't sleep much." She gave me a long look. "Good. That means your instincts are finally louder than your hope." We sat in the suite's lounge area, sunlight crawling across the hardwood floors. I hadn't opened the windows since I checked in. Didn't feel right letting the breeze in just yet. "I need you to help me dig," I said. "I think Darren's moving more than just money." Joe opened her laptop without another word. "Tell me what you've seen." I walked her through it all: the canceled dinner, the $15,000 transfer, the name Everlane Holdings, the photo from Ray, the woman in stilettos. Joe's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Everlane Holdings," she muttered. "Charleston, registered, LLC. New. Opened 6 weeks ago. Darren's listed as a managing officer, and here's something." She spun the laptop toward me. A website. Clean, minimal. Just a logo, a tagline, and a photo of a smiling woman next to a contact me form. Her name was listed as Haley Brooke Whitmore. Paralegal. Real estate consultant, Charleston-born. Passionate about modern design and women-led investment ventures. My stomach dropped. Joe clicked over to an archived version of the page. The original version didn't say consultant. It said, co-founder. "She changed it 2 days ago," Joe said quietly. "After the trust account was funded." I stared at Haley's photo. Glossy hair. Soft smile. The kind of beauty that doesn't ask questions, it just stands there and gets believed. "I've seen her before," I said, voice low. "She works in Darren's office." Joe raised her eyebrows. "How close?" "They always said she handled filings, scheduling, back-end stuff." "Back-end, all right." I didn't laugh. I couldn't. My chest felt like it was filled with glass. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. So I sat still and let the reality settle. It wasn't just that he was having an affair. It was that he was doing it with someone he'd set up for success. Someone he'd introduced to investors. Someone he'd helped build a fake business to funnel money into. He was funding her future with my present. Joe leaned back. "You ready to see the rest?" "There's more?" She pulled up a second tab. Bank data, file transfers. A secure folder link with a familiar string of numbers. "This is the folder you mentioned finding in his cloud drive, right?" I nodded. She clicked it open and read the document names aloud. Asset breakdown. Holdings review, Natalie. Property assessment, pre-post-marriage. One caught my eye. Plan phase Colme. After anniversary. I felt something sink inside me. Joe opened it. It wasn't long. Just bullet points. Cold, precise. Confirm trust deposit complete. Serve papers post. Anniversary trip. Move equity holdings under Everlane. Offer amicable split for optics. Public narrative. Mutual decision. Secure Mariner House details from Ray if possible. I stared at that last line. Secure Mariner House. He knew. Or he suspected. And he was going to use Ray to get to it, the one person I trusted most. I need to shut him out, I said. Completely. Before he tries anything else. How? Jo looked at me, something heavy behind her eyes. Then you need to stop being his wife in your head. I swallowed hard. I mean it, Nat. You're still waiting for the version of him who'd explain all this. That version never existed. I nodded, but something inside me still whispered, maybe. Old loyalty, slow. She softened. Look, you don't have to destroy him. But you do have to stop letting him walk ahead of you while you're still asking which direction we're going. Oh. We sat there in silence. Then I closed the laptop and stood. Let's go downstairs, I said. I need to show you something. We took the private elevator to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet, doors freshly polished, brass handles gleaming. I stopped in front of Suite 2D. This is the one from the photo, I said, where Darren was seen with her. Jo nodded slowly. You want me to pull the internal feed? No, I said. I want to leave it empty. Cold, unlit. And aid. Symbolic? Strategic. Jo smiled. Now you sound like my kind of client. As we walked back upstairs, I glanced over my shoulder at the closed door. Suite 2D. It didn't hold ghosts. It held proof. But I didn't need to go in. I already knew the truth. I just wasn't going to let him know I knew. Not yet. Jo was still in her robe, sipping hotel coffee and scrolling through financial filings when Ray knocked on the suite door. He didn't wait for me to answer. Just pushed it open like he used to when the AC broke in the bridal suite and I didn't have time to call maintenance. He held something wrapped in a plain blue towel. I figured now's the time, he said, setting it gently on the table. You told me to keep this safe, just in case. Jo perked up from the couch. That looks serious. Opal? I knew what it was before he unwrapped it. The black binder. No label. Just a single gold sticker on the spine. Blanbe. I hadn't opened it in almost 5 years. Not since the summer after Darren and I married. Back when I still believed prenups were only for people who didn't trust love. Back when I still thought planning for the worst meant you were inviting it. But I made the binder anyway. Quietly. Because something in me, the same thing that built the Mariner house from the ground up, knew better. Ray tapped the cover with one calloused finger. Still organized like a military briefing? I gave him a small smile. Color-coded tabs and all. He left without another word, and Jo sat up straighter. Nat, what is this? I opened it slowly. Inside were contingency plans, buried LLCs, premarital trust records, alternate ownership structures. Stuff I had drafted when I was still managing events and whispering to myself, just in case he ever tries something. Jesus, Jo muttered. You built a back door and then locked it from the outside. No, I said. I just never gave him the key. I flipped through the tabs. Every trust, every reinvestment, every property that had looked like ours but had always remained mine in name, in law, and now, in strategy. It was all still here. And it made me sick that I needed it. You said he might be spying, I said slowly. What do we need to check? Jo reached for her bag and pulled out a compact scanner. Start with your phone. 10 minutes later, she was frowning at the screen. There's a monitoring app embedded in your calendar, hidden behind your push notification settings. I swallowed. Text forwarding to an unknown email. GPS history archived separately. She paused, then turned the scanner toward my laptop. Same software. Executed from inside your own Wi-Fi network. I didn't say anything, just stared at the blinking cursor. He's been watching you, she said softly. Maybe for months. I felt the sting rise in my chest, hot and sharp. Not from the betrayal, I was past that. From the fact that I let him this close to the parts of me I had worked hardest to protect. I run a security-based business, I said, barely above a whisper. I protect people's privacy for a living. Joe met my eyes. You also believed your husband wasn't a thief. That landed like a slap. But she wasn't wrong. I reached for the binder and flipped to a section marked Independent Holdings. One document, sealed in plastic, had a sticky note that read, "Natalie, if you ever need to disappear, this is your first call." My old CPA had written that. He was 78 now, retired in Florida. But his name still held weight at the banks. Joe read it too. "We use this," she said. "And we don't let him see us coming." No. Something in me shifted right then. Not rage. Not fear. Something colder. Sharper. Focus. "I want to feed him misdirection," I said. "Let him think he's got access while we move everything through clean channels." Joe grinned. "Now you're speaking my language." We spent the next 6 hours creating a 3-layer strategy. Joe worked her legal contacts, I drafted false budget plans, and we moved select assets behind pre-existing protections. We even set up a shell communication folder in my laptop one Darren would think he had access to, filled with perfectly mundane noise. By nightfall, I was exhausted, but not defeated. I stepped into the shower and let the water hit my back until my fingers wrinkled. When I stepped out, Joe was asleep on the couch, laptop still open on her chest. And the binder sat on the coffee table, glowing under the lamplight like something sacred. I dried my hair in silence, pulled on an old college hoodie, and sat beside it. There was a line in the back of the binder, something I had handwritten a long time ago, when I thought Plan B was just insurance, not survival. Protect yourself like no one else will. That version of me had known something. And she'd been right. Darren called on Monday morning. Not to apologize, not to explain. Just to ask if I wanted to get away for the weekend. "Work's been nonstop," he said. "Figured we could escape to the lake house. Just us. No phones." I kept my voice light. "That sounds nice." He paused. "You sure? You've seemed distant." I let out a soft laugh. "Just tired." He bought it. Of course he did. He thought I was still walking behind him, trying to keep up. He didn't realize I was already circling him, quiet, methodical, unbothered. When we hung up, I looked at Joe across the room. She was reviewing account transfers on 2 screens, AirPods in, pen tapping the binder rhythmically. "He's planning to serve papers the day after," I said flatly. Joe didn't even glance up. "Then we have 6 days." I nodded. 7. If we count today. 7 days it is. We called it the countdown. Each day had a task. Each task chipped away at the story Darren thought he was controlling. Day 1, we flagged every account with my name on it. Not to block him, that would tip our hand. We just rerouted them. Quietly, precisely. Day 2, we created decoy folders on my cloud drive, spreadsheets, journal entries, legal notes, all designed to appear like I was preparing to settle. Passive. Defensive. Weak. Joe smiled as she named the folder Personal Reflections. "Esme. Let him think you're journaling your surrender," she said. Day 3, Ray stopped by again. Brought coffee and something else. A flash drive. "I pulled it from the office camera logs," he said. I wasn't going to, but then I saw his hands. "What about them?" I asked. Ray looked away. He was wearing gloves. Inside. Said he was cold. It was 83 degrees that day. He didn't have to say more. He knew. I knew. I plugged in the drive. The video was grainy, time-stamped 3 days ago. Darren stood in the office of our home. Calm. Still. Then he moved to the desk, opened the top drawer, and pulled out the small black safe I used for private client documents. The kind of contracts that could end a career if leaked. He didn't even hesitate. Typed the code. Opened it. Joe leaned over my shoulder. He knew the passcode? I changed it after we got married. He must have watched me type it. Once, maybe twice. I clenched my jaw. That was the thing about Darren. He didn't yell. He didn't break things. He just waited, watched. Collected. Let him have it, Joe said. Whatever was in there, it's replaceable. Your silence is not. That night, I sat on the bed, phone in hand, scrolling through old texts between us. There weren't many. Most were logistics. Flight times. Dinner reminders. Pick up milk. Love notes had faded long before the lies started. I stared at one from last year. Congrats on closing the Boston deal. Proud of you. I remembered that night. I came home late, still in heels, exhausted. He was already asleep. Or pretending to be. He never asked how it went. I let my thumb hover over the delete button. Then pulled back. Number. I wanted the full picture. Every pixel of what I thought we had. And what it actually was. Day 4, we set up a new trust. Joe named it Anchor South. The name meant nothing, which made it perfect. We used it to temporarily hold ownership transfers for the Mariner house, ensuring it remained outside the scope of marital claims. By day 5, I was no longer reacting. I was scripting. Every email. Every interaction. Every silence. Darren texted again. Should we pack together? I replied. Already setting things aside, excited for some peace. And then, for flair, I added a heart emoji. He responded with a thumbs up. God. A thumbs up. Joe watched me tap the screen and shook her head. That's how you know they're already gone. When emojis become a conversation. Day 6, I walked into the suite Darren had visited with Haley. Suite 2D. Still empty, still cold. I didn't need a confrontation. What I needed was certainty. So I set a hidden camera in the lamp base. Ray helped wire it. Nothing fancy, just insurance. If he came back with her, or alone, I'd have more than just suspicion. I'd have evidence. Not for court. For me. Day 7 came fast. Joe packed her things. She had to return to Atlanta for meetings but promised to stay close. You good? She asked, as she zipped her bag. I looked around the room. The binder sat on the table, now half empty. The decoys were live. The real assets were shielded. And my face. It no longer held the ache I'd worn when this started. Just focus. And something colder. Yeah, I said. I'm good. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. Whatever he tries next, don't flinch, don't blink. Let him think he's in control. I nodded. I'll give him the weekend he planned. And then I'll give him a story he won't forget. He waited until Sunday night. We'd just come back from dinner at a quiet seafood place he liked on Sullivan's Island, the kind with cloth napkins and waiters who called us folks like we were still happy. I played my part. Smiled at the right jokes. Ordered the same wine I always did. He didn't know I was watching every tick of his jaw, every flick of his thumb on his phone screen. He'd been checking the time all night. Like a man counting down to an explosion he thought only he could hear. When we got home to the house I hadn't truly slept in since I left for the Mariner, I set my purse down and walked to the kitchen, giving him room. Giving him cover. It only took 30 seconds. A knock at the door. Firm. Deliberate. I stayed where I was. I already knew. Darren opened the door and greeted the man like they were old colleagues. Thanks for making the drive out, he said. Courier. Not a lawyer. Not a friend. Just a man with a manila envelope and a rehearsed nod. He handed it over. Darren didn't even flinch. Then he turned, looked at me with a soft smile, and said, Can we talk? I tilted my head. Sure. He handed me the envelope like it was an invitation. This isn't what you think, he started. It was exactly what I thought. I opened it slowly. Divorce petition. Complete with asset breakdowns, suggestions for division, and a note at the bottom. Natalie to retain personal belongings and discretionary travel budget. Discretionary travel budget. As if I was a dependent. As if the Mariner house and everything I'd built before him was up for debate. I stared at the page, let my hands tremble, just a little. Not because I was nervous. Because I needed the footage to look believable. The camera in the hallway corner, the one he still didn't know about, caught every angle. My reaction. His blankness. The way he stepped forward like he was comforting me. Nat, he said. This doesn't have to be ugly. We can be civil about this. Civil, I repeated. I could hear my own voice shake. A performance. But it was rooted in truth. Because beneath all the planning, all the strategy, this still hurt. Not the divorce itself. The way he did it. Smiling through oysters. Handing it off like it was a parking ticket. I clutched the envelope and looked up at him. When were you going to tell me? He blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected me to ask. I wanted to wait until after the weekend, he said. Thought we could end things on a calm note. I nodded. And in that moment, I could see it. He believed he had won. That he'd played it perfectly. And I let him think that. That night, I went back to the Mariner without a word, said I needed air. He didn't protest. Probably figured I was grieving. Ray met me at the back entrance, like he always did. He didn't say anything, just looked at my face. Today? He asked. I nodded. He held the door open. Inside the suite, I peeled the clothes off like they were stage costumes. I stood under the hot water until my face felt normal again. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a towel, and pulled out my phone. Joe had texted hours ago. Let me know when it happens. And remember, don't speak until it's your turn to narrate. I smiled. Then I typed. Showtime. I sat in the Mariner's front office just after sunrise, watching the security footage from the night before. There he was. Darren. Not with Haley. Not with anyone. Just him, walking the halls alone like he owned the place. He didn't knock on any doors. Didn't ask for anyone at the desk. Just wandered. Hands in his pockets, jaw tight, like he was looking for something and didn't want to admit he'd lost it. He stopped outside Suite 4C mine and stared at the door for a good 10 seconds. Then he pulled a card from his wallet. Swiped it. Red light. Try again. Red again. I watched him lower the card slowly. His face didn't change, but his shoulders dropped just a little. Then he turned and walked back toward the elevator. I paused the video and stared at the screen. He'd tried to access the one place he was never invited into. Not really. He never once asked how I bought this hotel. Never once toured it, not even during renovations. He'd seen the lobby maybe twice. Said it smelled like cedar and lavender and joked that it was too quiet to be profitable. But he'd never asked for a key. And I never offered him one. That wasn't an accident. There were parts of me he never earned access to, and I didn't realize how rare that was until I watched him try to force his way in. The key card he used wasn't his, it was a generic guest access card. Probably stolen from a drawer in our house. I deleted the footage from the main system but saved a copy for myself. I didn't need to use it. Not yet. I just wanted the reminder. That morning, Joe called from Atlanta. His legal team submitted a preliminary claim, she said. They're arguing that the Mariner is marital property based on commingled contributions. I laughed. Out loud. Joe didn't. They're reaching, Nat. But that doesn't mean they won't make noise. Oh. I walked to the window, sunlight bouncing off the copper gutters. I never used joint funds. Not $1. He never even saw the cap table. I know. But if they scream loud enough, it slows down our filings. Then let's make our moves louder. Joe paused, then said, You ready for the trust filing? I nodded. Anchor South is clean? Locked and shielded. I opened the drawer of the front desk and pulled out a notary seal mine. One of many things Darren never knew I kept in my name. I signed the last page and pressed the seal down slowly, letting the stamp burn into the paper. Joe exhaled. It's done. They can't touch it now. There was a silence on the line. Then she said something I didn't expect. I'm proud of you. He blinked hard, once. Not because I needed the validation, but because I didn't know how much I'd been carrying alone until someone said they saw it. I just didn't want to be a woman who got blindsided and stayed small. You're not, Joe said. You're the woman who watched him dig a pit and let him think it was for you. That night, I went upstairs to my suite and pulled out the original keycard, the one issued to me when I first opened the Mariner. It was slightly worn, the logo faded at the edge. But it still worked. Still unlocked the place I built from nothing. I held it in my hand for a long time. Then slipped it into the bedside drawer, tucked beneath an old photo of me and my mom taken before any of this began. There was peace in that drawer. And power. Two things Darren would never hold again. I used to envy Darren's composure. At fundraisers or family weddings, he always knew what to say, how to stand just close enough, how to make people feel heard without actually listening. He wore charm like a perfectly tailored suit. But charm, like any costume, starts to wear thin when the actor forgets his lines. The first crack showed up in mediation. We weren't even seated yet. I was setting down my notebook when his attorney leaned across the table and said, "We'd like to revisit the equity clause regarding the hotel. Our client recalls significant unpaid labor contributing to its value." He blinked. Unpaid labor? Darren hadn't lifted a finger inside the Mariner. He didn't even know where the water heater was. I turned my head and looked at him. He didn't meet my eyes. That was new. For years, Darren always stared directly at me during conflict. Not aggressively performatively. As if to say, "Look how calm I am. Look how unreasonable you're being." But that morning, he was staring at his notes like they were written in a language he didn't understand. I didn't speak. Just flipped to a page marked 2014 CapEx receipts and slid it forward. Let the record show I paid for every screw in the building. His attorney cleared her throat and moved on. Outside the conference room, Darren caught up to me near the elevators. "Hey," he said. "Don't let them make this messy." I tilted my head. "Them?" He gave that half smile he used on waitstaff and Uber drivers. "Lawyers, you know how they are, all fire and drama. I thought you picked them." "I did," he said quickly. "But they don't always. Listen. Anyway, you looked good in there. Composed." It was meant to be a compliment. But something in his tone felt off. Like he was testing me. Looking for the version of me who used to backpedal at the first hint of tension. I stayed quiet. He shifted his weight. "You remember Savannah? That trip we took after your promotion?" Of course, I remembered. The trip where he spent most of the weekend on his phone, calling it a transition period for a client, which I later found out was the beginning of his thing with Haley. "You wore that red wrap dress," he said. "The one that looked like it was made for you." I nodded. "You still have it?" I looked at him and said flatly, "I gave it to Goodwill." His jaw tightened. Just for a second. Then he nodded. "Okay. Well, take care." He turned and walked away. I watched his back as he disappeared around the corner. And for the first time, I didn't feel a pull. Not anger. Not sadness. Nothing. Just observation. Like I was watching a man from a distance I no longer needed to close. Back at the Mariner, Ray was repairing a light fixture near the lobby when I walked in. He gave me a quick nod. "How'd it go?" "They're reaching," I said. Trying to convince themselves he mattered more than he did. Ray smirked. That man always looked like he had a plan, but his hands were too clean. Real builders have dust on them. I sat on the bench near the front window and stared out at the street. "You ever see someone shrink and not even realize it?" I asked. Ray wiped his hands on a rag. "Only every time a bully loses the room." I smiled. Upstairs, I pulled out my notebook and jotted down a single line. "Charm cracks when it's built on borrowed confidence." Then I underlined it twice. Later that night, Darren texted me. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message. Felt nothing. Then turned off my phone and slipped it in the drawer beside the keycard he never earned. The smell of rosemary and garlic hit me before I even opened the door. For a second, my brain couldn't place it. Not because it was unfamiliar, but because it had been years since I smelled anything Darren actually cooked. He used to love it, Back when we were both broke and pretending that Trader Joe's frozen scallops counted as fine dining. Back when we'd sit on the floor and eat out of mismatched bowls with Jazz playing off his laptop. I stepped into the house, my house, and there he was. Darren. In the kitchen. Wearing the apron my sister gave us for our first anniversary. The one with the stitched quote about love and leftovers. He looked up and smiled like we were back in 2016. "Hey," he said. "Figured you might be hungry." He lifted the lid on a pan and steam rose. Lemon herb chicken. Roasted potatoes, white wine already breathing on the counter. I didn't say anything. Just looked at him. "What's all this?" I asked. He shrugged, like it wasn't calculated. Thought maybe we could hit pause. Talk, like, before. "Before what?" I asked. He faltered, just slightly. "Before all the legal stuff. Before the noise." Fist to sigh. Note. I stepped closer, slowly. "You served me divorce papers, Darren. That's not noise, that's a decision." He nodded. "I know." I panicked. Everything was moving fast. I felt like we were slipping away. He tilted my head. "We?" He gave a half laugh. "Look, I know I screwed up. With Haley. With all of it. But that she wasn't." He stopped. The words caught. Not because he didn't know what to say. Because he knew none of it would work. I watched him closely. This wasn't a man trying to reconcile. This was a man trying to reset the story. Make himself the wounded one. Make me the cold one. Rewrite the script so that the audience, our friends, his firm, his family wouldn't see the full truth. He gestured to the table, where he'd already set 2 plates. Candles. Napkins folded the way I used to do when I still believed dinner could fix anything. "Just one meal," he said. "No talk about paperwork, just us." I sat down slowly. Not because I wanted to eat. Because I wanted to see what he thought us still meant. He served me like he used to. Cut the chicken carefully. Poured my glass just right. And for a moment, one short moment, my stomach turned with a memory I didn't want. Of the version of him I used to love. The one who kissed my forehead before I went into early investor meetings. The one who stood behind me while I painted the first wall at the Mariner and said, "You're gonna build something that matters." That version of him was long gone. But the memory still had weight. I looked down at the plate. At the rosemary sprigs he'd fanned over the chicken like a Food Network audition. Then my phone buzzed. "Joe. You sitting down?" she wrote. "He's bleeding clients. Someone at the firm's leaking receipts. Ethics board might get involved." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Not grief. Clarity. He wasn't cooking because he missed me. He was cooking because the ship was sinking, and I was the only lifeboat he still recognized. I set down my fork. "You always hated rosemary," I said quietly. Darren looked up. "What?" "You said it made everything taste like soap." He blinked. "I did?" I stood. "Thanks for dinner," I said. "But I'm not your pause button." He followed me to the door, voice soft. "Nat, come on. It's just a meal." "No," I said, turning to face him. "It's just an audition. And I'm not giving you the part." He didn't argue. Just stood there, face slack, apron still on. As I walked out, I passed the coat rack. Still hanging there was the scarf he gave me on our 3rd anniversary. I took it down, folded it once, and dropped it in the donation box by the entry. That night, back at the Mariner, I opened a bottle of wine, the good kind Joe sent me, and poured a glass in the quiet. I didn't toast. I didn't cry. I just sat by the window, watched the streetlights flicker, and thought. He didn't want me back. He just wanted the version of me who didn't see through him. The thing about people like Darren is, they don't get sloppy because they're stupid. They get sloppy because they believe they're invisible. I was poring over court filings that morning when Ray texted me. Found something weird in the printer log. You want to come take a look? I slipped on flats, threw my hair in a knot, and walked to the back office of the Mariner. Ray was standing by the old HP laser, The one we never really used, since everything went digital, holding a half-curled page with black smudges on the edge. "I was doing a supply check," he said, "and saw this stuck behind the tray. Looks like it tried to print weeks ago." I took the paper, smoothing it flat. It was a scanned bank authorization, partial, but legible enough to read Darren's signature at the bottom. Authorization to transfer funds from joint account Emerson, Natalie to Everlane Holdings. Myaftenst. This wasn't part of the discovery packet his attorneys submitted. I would have remembered. It was dated 2 weeks before he filed for divorce. He blinked. He hadn't just planned to move money. He'd done it while pretending to still be married with full access, full rights, full trust. He left this piece behind, buried under toner and dust. "You sure this hasn't been touched?" I asked. Ray crossed his arms. "Only folks with access to this office are you, me, and that intern who couldn't figure out the coffee machine. And she left in March." I snapped a picture of the page and emailed it to Joe. Then I folded the original and tucked it into the back of the Plan B binder. Ray didn't press me, he didn't need to. He just handed me a fresh cup of coffee and said, "Some people forget ink keeps receipts better than memory." Back upstairs, my phone buzzed. "Joe, that doc is a gift. Want to use it now or hold?" I didn't answer right away. I stared out the window at the jasmine vine curling along the brick. A plant I'd planted myself 5 years ago when I still thought roots meant permanence. Then I typed, "We hold. It's stronger when he thinks we don't have it." That evening, Darren called. I almost didn't answer, but part of me wanted to hear the tone shift, to see which mask he'd wear this time. "Hey," he said, overly casual. "We need to talk numbers." I let him talk. He floated an amicable figure. Tried to sound generous. Mentioned the optics of dragging this out. Said, "It's bad for both of us." His voice cracked at the end. Just slightly. He was sweating something. And it wasn't me. I stayed cool. "I'll have Joe review the offer. You don't have to lawyer everything, Nat. It's just a clean exit." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "No, Darren. It's not an exit. It's a reckoning." He paused. I could feel the panic, small, quiet, bleeding into the edge of his breath. "You think this is about punishment?" he asked. "No," I said. "I think this is about proof." I ended the call. That night, I pulled out the receipt again. Read it twice. Not because I needed to. Because I wanted to remember the moment the tide turned, not emotionally, but legally. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about evidence. Something he forgot to erase. Something I was never supposed to see. I tucked the page beneath my pillow and slept deeper than I had in weeks. There's a room on the 2nd floor of the Mariner house that doesn't have a name. No number. No placard. Just a locked door with a frosted pane of glass and a view no guest would ever pay for. Back alley, delivery crates, faded brick. Inside that room is the server that runs everything. Every hallway camera. Every card swipe. Every moment he thought no one saw. I stood in that room Monday morning. Just me and Ray. The air smelled like dust and copper wiring. He handed me a flash drive. "Pulled the full suite 2D footage," he said. "The night he used the keycard." I nodded. Took it in both hands like it was something sacred. "You sure you want to send this now?" he asked. I looked at the screen one last time. Darren. Walking in with Haley. Laughing. Confident. Holding a key he didn't earn, touching a place that never belonged to him. "I'm sure," I said. Joe called later that afternoon. Voice sharp, excited. "It landed." "What did?" "The footage. The print log. The Everlane timestamp. All of it." She took a breath, then added, "His firm has called an emergency board review. Rumor is he's being suspended pending investigation." I didn't cheer. Didn't smile. I just closed my laptop and stared at the sunlight hitting the far wall. Had spent months building a quiet trap. I'd spent weeks dismantling it in silence. And now, without a single confrontation or headline, he was collapsing from the inside out. Joe exhaled into the phone. You played this like a goddamn surgeon. I ran a finger over the rim of my coffee mug. Ceramic. Cracked at the handle. Still whole. I didn't play anything, I said. I just waited until the truth got tired of being polite. That evening, Darren showed up at the Mariner. No appointment. No warning. Just appeared in the lobby wearing the same blazer he wore when he proposed. Ray stopped him at the front desk. She's unavailable. Darren's voice wasn't loud, but it was tight. Ray, I need to talk to her. Just 5 minutes. Ray didn't flinch. She said no guests after 6. Darren scoffed. You think she owns this place? Ray stared at him. She does. That shut him up. I watched the whole thing on the camera feed from upstairs. He looked thinner. Less certain. Like the floor under him had given way and he was still pretending he could walk on air. When he turned to leave, he glanced up at the corner camera. Just for a second. It was the first time he looked into the eye of the thing that had been watching him all along. The truth isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It just needs to survive long enough to be seen. And now it had. Back in my suite, I pulled out the final copy of the settlement Joe had drafted. It was clean. Protective. Final. No loopholes. No concessions. No room for his version of events. The pen sat on the table beside it. I didn't sign. Not yet. Instead, I opened the drawer where I'd kept that old picture of us, the one from the Christmas party before everything started to rot. I looked at it for a long time. Not with sadness. With curiosity. Who was that woman beside him? Who did she have to be to survive him? Then I folded the photo once. Slid it behind the binder. And left it there. Some things aren't meant to be burned. They're meant to be buried. I signed the papers on a Thursday. No music. No audience. Just the rustle of paper and the soft scratch of pen on wood. The same desk where I'd once mapped out wedding, seating charts, and welcome bag checklists now held the final line of a marriage I'd already left in every way but ink. I didn't cry. I didn't smile, either. I just signed. Then I pressed the pen down a little harder than I needed to and let the silence settle around me like a sigh. Joe had offered to be there, said she'd drive up from Atlanta. But I told her no. This part was mine. Later that morning, I walked the hallways of the Mariner. Slowly. Room by room. Light switches. Door handles, baseboards. Every scuff mark was a memory. Every polished edge was proof. This wasn't just a hotel. It was the one place he never reached. The one thing I built that never bent around him. And now, it wasn't a defense. It was home. Ray found me in the garden near the Jasmine Arch. He didn't say anything right away. Just stood beside me, sipping from a styrofoam cup. Signed it, I said. He nodded. Knew you would. I looked up at the sun slicing through the vines. It was warm. Not punishing. Just there. He thought I'd fight louder, I said. Ray smiled. Loud fights are for people who still need to be heard. You didn't. We stood in silence a while longer. Then I reached down, dug my fingers into the soil, and pulled out a weed that had been choking the edge of the rose bed. One tug. Clean release. Ray glanced over. That the last one? I looked at the root in my hand. For now. That afternoon, I opened the suite to sunlight and opened the windows for the first time in weeks. The breeze smelled like salt and honeysuckle. I pulled out the binder Plan B one final time. It looked worn now. Handled. Useful. I slid it into the hotel safe. Not because I needed it anymore, but because I knew I never wanted to forget what it felt like to have no plan at all. Before I closed the safe, I added something. A photograph. Not the one with Darren. A new one. Taken a week ago. Just me, Ray, and Joe laughing over iced tea and court transcripts. No makeup. No pretense. Just the 3 people who helped pull me out of the dark. At sunset, I walked the rooftop garden and watched guests filter into the event space below a rehearsal dinner for a couple from Asheville. They waved when they saw me. I waved back. And I meant it. Every corner of this place was alive again. Not because I'd survived something. Because I'd chosen not to stay small after it. I didn't tossed. Didn't journal. Didn't light a candle or burn sage. I just stood barefoot on my rooftop, eyes closed, arms loose at my sides. And whispered, "It's done." Then I opened my eyes. And went downstairs.